Hello, I just want to talk a little bit about solo fantasy, the concepts behind it, and what I would use it for as a referee. The basic premise is solo fantasy was it's a catch-up table. Now, a catch-up table is an old concept where if somebody misses a play session, you can put them into a catch-up table and they can very quickly get back up to speed to an equivalent level of the other players in the game. In the solo fantasy, I wanted a very complete representation of the character's life. So it starts with almost at your birth, you're coming of age, and from there you move out into the countryside, but it's not just the countryside and it's not just the typical dungeon crawls. You might end up in some sort of backwater area as a major domo of a fief. You may have a fief of your own that you develop through play. You spend a lot of time at taverns, which is very typical of fantasy role-play games, and you might go through crossroads or talking with nobles. You might end up on the sea, a very undeveloped aspect of most fantasy games, and a lot of moving down the roads, off the King's Highway or off the beaten paths through the Fey Forest. You might end up in a larger scale army and moving that army about the campaign or into actual battles on a grander scale. There's all of the intrigue that you would expect, whether or not you're being captured or put on trial, whether or not you're sent into exile. There's the classic fantasy tropes of being a pit fighter or moving into the whole series of underworlds, exploring an underworld or dealing with the traps within or dealing with the trickery of the monsters involved. And finally, at the end of the section, and this is, I think it's a 400, 500-page booklet. At the end of it all, there are some detailed quests that result in the end of your distant travel or whether or not you're verifying a myth. Some political intrigue, verifying a legend or defeating a legendary monster, and finally certain magical discoveries. I needed a set of mechanics, so it wasn't just reading story paragraph after story paragraph, and so I just adapted them to the freestyle rules. Now, the freestyle rules have a couple of concepts that I think you should be aware of. The first is that there are no stats. The character is given traits. In this case, only 4 of the traits from a game like Outlands are being used: bold, energetic, methodical, and rugged. And there are skills. It's a skill-based game. I know the old school concept is that the player has the wisdom and he's the one that imparts it into the scene, but that would take, obviously, a referee to make those rulings on whether or not you were successful with what you're doing. With a skill-based game, if you are a bowman or you are a minstrel, those will appear during the flow of the progression path, and by having those skills you usually get an easier chance to move on to a less than harmful result. Now, the concept of ignobles is something that probably most of you are not familiar with. Instead of gathering up experience points, 100 here, 50 there, what I do in a freestyle fashion is that I decide that the players need 9 specific events, 9 specific achievements, 9 specific ignoble deeds that they must accomplish through play. And all of these ignobles are actually triggered within the body of the text. Event says that you can check battle from this, well, you can check battle from this. If it says that you've had a magical encounter, well, you've had a magical encounter. After you've checked all 9 of these ignoble deeds, you would go up a level. So if you were telling one of your players that he needs to go up 1 level in order to stay parity with the group, you might send him onto these tables and have him run his adventures looking to check each of the ignoble deeds once, and by doing so he will also have a backstory. Now, there's no one who physically really dies on the table. There is a death table. There is a point where theoretically the character is gone. And if you wanted to play in a hardcore faction, you could see how far you could go in number of events before that occurs. When I took one of my first characters up from level 0 to level 8, I think I died about 7 or 8 times. But each time the death has sort of a timely interruption that'll get you out of the jam and put you right back into it. Swaggering is another concept of freestyle roleplay. Instead of actually having combat ability skills, you pick up swaggering through actual play. These are almost skills that are earned through combat, and those are things like your charismatic style or your killer instinct. There's a magic ability. This is a severely truncated magical ability, probably compared to most games that you played, even compared to Chronicles of the Outlands. But these are the major magical abilities that will appear in the tables. Now, I play a classless system where each character can develop his own magical abilities and use them as he desires. But in the boundaries of these encounter tables of solo fantasy, you'll find that it will refer to a player picking up magical abilities or needing a magical ability in order to get past a certain difficult situation. You can also interpret these as various magical items, because most, especially OSR, has thousands upon thousands of magical items, and it's not really the innate ability of the person involved, but it's his magical accoutrement that he's picked up. 3 types of companions, wenches, cohorts, and strangers. Those will appear through play and either get you into trouble or get you out of trouble. And finally, there's a whole set of 9 perilous conditions. By having something like you're hunted by an assassin or you're dealing with religious doubt, those will send you to harsher tables within the body of the flow. Most of the rolls are from a generic table, this generic chance to succeed on 2d8. If you're told to make a difficult roll, depending upon your level, it would either be a 12 or a 5. That's, again, typical of most role-play games. I would not read too much into this. And again, if a lot of these concepts seem a little strange to you, you can still run the tables and have a fascinating time seeing what trouble or what adventures you can get into. They seem more involved than a lot of things I've seen in role-play. But that's just a sales pitch now, isn't it? I've covered most of the mechanics here. If you have any questions, contact us over at the Space Gamer website. Just put a message in the box there, and we'll answer. I'd be happy to do so. Otherwise, pick this game up on DriveThruRPG. Again, more later.